The Cincinnati Bengals finished the 2023 season with a 9-8 record and missed the playoffs for the first time since 2020. It was a very frustrating year for the Bengals as they started out the year with a 1-3 record before winning 4 straight games to improve to 5-3, which included a double-digit win over the 49ers in their stadium, in a game where Joe Burrow threw for over 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also completed over 87% of his passes, and this was the game where the Bengals looked like they were overcoming the rough start and that they were probably going to be competing for a trip to the Super Bowl when January rolled around. They even looked good against the Bills in Week 9 as they forced the Bills into having 2 turnovers and won with a score of 24-18. Unfortunately, the next week, the Texans invaded the jungle and beat Cincinnati with a score of 30-27 and had over 540 yards of total offense. CJ Stroud threw for over 350 yards, and this was supposed to be a minor setback for the Bengals, and it happens. Every team loses a game here or there. But unfortunately, 4 days later in a Week 11 game in Baltimore, the Bengals season was flipped upside down as Joe Burrow would exit the game with a season-ending injury. And the Bengals had some flashes after Burrow went down, like a stunning Week 13 win on Monday Night Football over the Jags, but when your starting quarterback goes down, your season is, well, pretty much over. And the Cincinnati Bengals enter the 2024 season with a Super Bowl or bust mentality. They went to the Super Bowl back in 2021, and I think they're going to get back there at some point during the Joe Burrow era, at least you would think. But the only question is, will they get back there in 2024? Well, we're going to break it down in today's video. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by breaking down what the Bengals did in free agency, both in terms of who they acquired and who they lost. The reality of building a team in today's NFL is teams are going to lose starters over an offseason or two, and we've seen that with the Bengals over the last few years. During the 2023 free agency period, the Bengals lost Jesse Bates, and that was fine because they had prepared for this. They knew a year in advance that they were not going to pay Jesse Bates and drafted a replacement in Dax Hill. And Dax had a really solid year for the Bengals this past year, as he had over 100 tackles and even had 2 interceptions. And this offseason, they lost a few starters in corner Chidobe Awuzie, as he went to the Titans, right tackle Jonah Williams went to the Cardinals, and the big fella, beloved defensive tackle DJ Reader, signed with the Lions. They also lost 2-time 1,000-yard receiver Tyler Boyd to the Titans, and the trio of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and of course Tyler Boyd is no longer. That is the reality of building a team in today's NFL, and the most notable example, of course, is Buffalo, as they lost both safeties this offseason in Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, as well as offensive players like Mitch Morse and Gabe Davis. And they also traded Stephon Diggs to the Texans. And the reason we bring the Bills up is because they're not the only team to go through this, and Cincinnati has too. This is the reality of building a team in today's era, is the retooling or reloading of a roster every few years. But I liked what the Bengals did in free agency with the financial assets they had available. They brought in Sheldon Rankins from the Texans, who had 40 pressures during the 2023 season, and bringing in a player who can push the pocket from the interior in today's era is huge, no pun intended. They also have BJ Hill on the roster, who had 42 pressures last year, and I fully expect the Bengals defense to be one of the better units in all of football this year. They have 2 good interior pass rushers and even drafted a guy I like a lot in the 2nd round in Michigan's Chris Jenkins, who we will further break down during the rookie impact part of the video. But being able to rush from the interior in today's era is huge, and there's a reason NFL teams have started shelling out contracts north of $20 million per year to interior offensive linemen, and it's because they do not want pressure in the face of their quarterbacks if they can prevent it. And having 2 players who had 40 pressures each last year be able to get after the quarterback is huge. This is, of course, without mentioning Trey Hendrickson, who just had a career year as he would go on to have a 17.5 sack season last year, which was good for 2nd in the NFL, only behind TJ Watt. Sam Hubbard had a bit of a letdown year last year relative to the player he was in 2021 and 2022, and I think he will be a better player in 2024 than he was in 2023. Hubbard had back-to-back 50-plus pressure seasons in 2021 and 2022, followed by just a 40 pressure season last year, and I would expect more than a 6-sack season from him this year. Sacks are not everything, of course, but I also think Sam will have a better year this year from a pressure standpoint. And one other move the Bengals made that I liked a lot during the 2023 draft was selecting Myles Murphy in the first round. Myles didn't play much during his rookie year, but that's fine because of the guys he had in front of him. And having a player like Myles get to play behind both Trey and Sam should, in theory, only be beneficial for the long-term impact of his career. Myles was only 21 during his rookie season, and this pick was always going to be a developmental selection, or in the best case scenario, a pick that may not have immediately paid off during the 2023 regular season, but would have given them a third option to get after the quarterback in late January when it mattered, because at that point in the year, Myles would have had a full season under his belt. The only problem, of course, was the Bengals had an injury-riddled year and unfortunately never got to the postseason. I love the Bengals front four entering this year, but I don't just like the front four. In fact, I like all of their defense, and I know we've said this about several signings or moves throughout the offseason for several different teams, but one move that is not talked about a lot by the media that I liked a lot was the signing of safety Geno Stone. Geno had a career year for the Ravens in 2023, and anytime you can bring in a player that had 7 interceptions last year, while also taking a starter from a division rival, especially at a reasonable cost, I am all for it every single time. The Bengals signed Geno to a 2-year deal, and what I liked in particular about this deal was if Geno was a one-year wonder, and if Geno has one good season throughout his entire career, that would have been the 2023 regular season, the Bengals are protected because they only gave him $6 million guaranteed of the $14 million he signed for. So even in the worst case scenario, he's gone in a year and the organization is protected too. I also like the fact that they brought back Von Bell after a 1-year stint with the Panthers, and even if Von does not play a whole lot for Cincy during the 24 season, I am all for having secondary depth, especially in today's era, and especially in a conference where you will have to go through not just one, but several good quarterbacks to get to the Super Bowl. Safety Jordan Battle had a really solid rookie season, and my thought process here with him is pretty simple. If you had a good rookie year, like Jordan did, who was a rookie 3rd-round pick last year, then I would expect that to continue because the big transition year would have been during his rookie season. I also think the Bengals corners are pretty solid, which of course is led by Cam Taylor-Britt and one of the best nickel corners in all of football in Mike Hilton. DJ Turner was picked on at times throughout the 2023 season, which should have been expected as a 2nd-round rookie corner. Now, what may be surprising to some people is the Bengals finished 28th in opposing passing yards allowed last year, but despite that, they finished 21st in points allowed per game, and what needs to be remembered for the Bengals entering the 2024 season is I don't think their pass defense will be as bad as it was last year at times, and even despite allowing as many yards as they did last year, they still finished with a winning record. They had very abnormal games for the Bengals, like getting beat by 20-plus points by the Browns and Titans, but they overcame a lot of adversity throughout the 2023 season, and I do believe they were on their way to righting the ship before Joe Burrow unfortunately had a season-ending injury. And if you look at 3 losses in particular down the stretch of the season for the Bengals, and in particular the 16-10 loss to the Steelers in Week 12, the 34-11 loss to Pittsburgh in Week 16, and the 25-17 loss to the Chiefs in Week 17, is putting up 38 points in 3 games a winning recipe? No, and neither is allowing 34 points for that matter either. But I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that if they have a healthy Joe Burrow in those games, they put up more points and there's a chance they win. And this was all with a team that went 9-8 last year. The Bengals didn't go 5-12 and didn't start out 2-6 before Joe Burrow got hurt. Yes, they had some bad games, but they were on their way back up. And to be completely honest with where the Bengals are entering the 2024 season, I don't like how underrated they are heading into the year, because I truly think, and this doesn't apply to every team, but it absolutely applies to the Bengals, but I think they play better when they're underdogs and when they're being slept on, and out of any of the past few years, the Bengals are absolutely being slept on more than they ever have been, and they are serious contenders in the loaded AFC. Now, with the Bengals' 2024 offense, it should be, well, a lot better with Joe Burrow this year than it was down the stretch of the 23 season. Now, Jake Browning didn't play bad, but obviously there is a difference in play between Jake Browning and Joe Burrow. Now, just being honest, the reality of quarterback play in today's era is there are not going to be a lot of quarterbacks, whether the guy is Anthony Richardson, the 6'5", 250-pound player, or Bryce Young, the 5'10", 200-pound player, or Joe Burrow, who's closer towards Richardson than he is Bryce Young. The point is, not a lot of quarterbacks are going to start and play all 17 games, so it is incredibly important to have a good backup quarterback. Now, it is different having a long-term backup quarterback versus a guy who can spot start for a game or two. So whenever you are doing season-long projections in July and June, July, and even August, you have to at least assume the starting quarterback is going to play for at least 15 or 16 of the games. And the Bengals offense this year, the one big thing that even with Joe Burrow that they did not do in 2023, or really even 2022 for that matter, is start off strong. This team, for whatever reason, usually tends to struggle at the beginning of the year. Now, it's a little different whenever they're playing in the AFC Championship game or back in 2021 when they were playing in the Super Bowl, but you don't want to get in a habit of starting out 2-3 with this mindset of, we're good, Joe Burrow and the gang will figure it out, and they'll be fine by late January. It's a little different playing Tyler Huntley in the wild card round of the playoffs and then playing a Buffalo Bills team that had lost their number one pass rusher and had been through a lot during the 2022 season, and then to go play Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. You cannot rely on playing a backup quarterback in the wild card round and then assuming everything is going to be fine. And that's going to be essential for the Bengals this year. I really think for this team to get back to the Super Bowl for what would be the second time in 4 years, they can't afford one of their slow or lackluster starts that we've seen over the past few years. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Joe Burrow plays coming off of the injury and how quick they get into action, because like we've seen over the past few years, they are a slow starter. One part of the Bengals offense I do have concerns with is the run game, whether it's Zach Moss, Chase Brown, Travion Williams. I don't think any of those guys are top 15 or maybe even 20 running backs in the league. And when you're in a conference where being able to close out games is critical and being able to run the ball when it matters, especially late in the fourth quarter, that concerns me with the Bengals. Now, do I worry about Cincinnati being able to win games? No, that's not the point that I'm making. But I do worry about their run game, and I think they will finish in the lower half of that in 2024. Now, from a stat projection standpoint from Burrow, Chase, and T. Higgins, not surprisingly, I would expect both Chase and T. Higgins to go for over 1,000 yards this year, and to be completely honest, I wouldn't be surprised if Jamar goes for career highs in several categories, mainly due to the run game not being great or not expected to be great, and I think it's very realistic for Jamar to have a 100 reception season, and for him to even break his rookie receiving yards record, or to break that mark rather, in year 4, and for him to have double-digit touchdowns. This could be T. Higgins' final year, and what's going to be important for T. Higgins this year is this is also an audition year for not just the Bengals to give him a contract extension, but for 31 other teams as well. I do expect T to go for over 1,000 yards. I think he is a very, very good receiver, and 2023 was a tough season for the Bengals, and it was especially tough for T. From a stat projection, I think Burrow will be around 45 or 4,600 yards, 33 or 34 touchdowns, again, assuming he plays 16 or 17 games, and with Chase and Higgins both over 1,000, and with Jamar right around 14 or 1,500 yards. I am really excited for receiver Jermaine Burton, and we will not only discuss Jermaine, but several other players in the rookie impact part, which we're diving into now. Now, for the 2024 Bengals rookie impact, to be honest, I really loved what the Bengals did in the 2024 draft, but pertaining to this year specifically, I don't know how much impact they're necessarily going to have, and it kind of starts with Amarius Mims. As of right now, he is a backup tackle slated behind Trent Brown on the depth chart, and they have Orlando Brown at left tackle, obviously Trent at right, and then Amarius behind Trent. What I will say positively about this selection is I think Amarius will be a great tackle in the long run, whether he takes over in year 2, maybe even midway through year 1 if Trent struggles, or even if Orlando struggles. I think the Bengals will have a very good tackle in Amarius Mims for the foreseeable future. He only played, I want to say, 11 games during his time at Georgia, so there was some concern with his longevity or with how many snaps he played during his collegiate career, but the player that was consistently shown on tape was every bit worth of a first-round pick and a player that will play at a high level for a long time. Now, their second-round pick, Chris Jenkins, was to me a guy that I absolutely loved all throughout the draft process. Most of the time, though not every time, I think Frank Gore Jr. would kind of be an exception, but a lot of the time I really like former players' kids, and Chris Jenkins is the son of Chris Jenkins, who was a defensive tackle for the Panthers in the early 2000s, and Chris, the older Chris, was a multiple-time All-Pro for the Panthers, and whenever you have a son of a former player, like an Antoine Winfield Jr. for reference, guys generally read their keys better, they've been taught the right things, they really don't have any bad habits, and Chris Jenkins played that way during his time at Michigan. I really like that selection. The only, not even negative, just it's worth noting, but guys in the trenches generally, especially the interior trenches, take a little bit longer to develop, so I wouldn't expect Chris to have a 45 or 50 pressure rookie season, but I think he will be a solid rotational rusher in year 1, and a guy that I think will eventually start in year 2 and beyond. The player that I think will have the most rookie impact in 2024 is actually third-round receiver Jermaine Burton. The impact of him adds up due to the departure of Tyler Boyd, and I think Jermaine can come in and easily be a 5 or 6, maybe even a 700-yard receiver in year 1, because what again also has to be remembered is the Bengals are going to be throwing the football a lot, and I don't think they're going to be a top 8 or 10 rushing team, which in turn will have Joe Burrow throw the ball for, well, a lot of yards, a lot of attempts, and Jamar and T. Higgins are not the only guys in the team, and teams will at times force Jermaine Burton to be the guy to beat them, which I absolutely think he can be in a wide receiver 3 role. I also really like Josh Newton on day 3. I thought that was a really good value pick, and we don't really discuss 7th round players in terms of rookie impact, simply because a lot of the time 7th round rookies, well, really don't have a lot of rookie impact, but I really liked center Matt Lee late in the 2024 draft, and I think he can be a guy that hangs around on the roster for a little while, and I think he's going to be a long-time rotational offensive lineman. Now, I don't know if he's going to play 7 or 8 years in Cincinnati, but I do think Matt Lee has the build of a guy that will last in the league for a while. So, for the Bengals 2024 rookie impact, wouldn't necessarily expect a whole lot, but I think they can have a 600 or 700 yard year for Jermaine Burton. Love the long-term potential, maybe not the most in 2024. Now, earlier in the video, we mentioned that the Bengals cannot afford to start the year slow like they have in years past, and fortunately for the Bengals, their schedule at the start of the 2024 season is a bit easier than you may expect, so a 4-2 or 5-1 start is not unreasonable for them. They open up against the Patriots, then go to Kansas City, which will be a tough game. Then they come home to play the Commanders, then go to the Panthers, then come home to play the Ravens in Week 5, then go to New York to play the Giants in Week 6. I really think it is essential for the Bengals' 2024 success to start the year 4-2, because you would think in the AFC North that 10 games probably is not enough to win the division, and they cannot afford to start out and drop a game to the Commanders or drop one to the Giants. So again, a 4-2 start through the first 6 to me is pivotal for Cincinnati. I don't think you can rely on being a wild card team and relying on Joe Burrow being Joe Shiesty or Joe Burr in the playoffs and hoping that he pulls a lucky rabbit's hat out of his ass or something to win 2 or 3 road playoff games. Can it happen? In theory, yes, but I wouldn't want to take those chances with Joe Burrow, and I wouldn't want to take those chances with Patrick Mahomes, even on the road against whether it's Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, Lamar, any of those guys in the playoffs, CJ Stroud. I would not want to have 3 road games in the playoffs. So the 4-2 or even 5-1 start for the Bengals is essential to their 2024 season. The team ceiling for me for the 2024 Cincinnati Bengals is going to be an AFC Championship loss. I don't want to get into the habit of, well, you can talk yourself into this team can go to the Super Bowl and that team can go to the Super Bowl, and out of all of the team previews we've done so far, there's been one team that has a team ceiling of a Super Bowl win, and that's been the Detroit Lions. Now, they play in the NFC, so a little different path to get to the Super Bowl for them than what the Bengals would probably have to go through, but what really concerns me with the Bengals moving forward in the 24 season, and especially when you get down the stretch, and especially when you play in late January, is the lack of run game I anticipate from them. They can obviously still have a very successful season, but getting to the Super Bowl and then playing in New Orleans, which is obviously something Joe Burrow and Jamar would want to do, and would be a very storybook ending, I wouldn't bet on it, and I don't think that's going to happen this year. But I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 42% of people watching are subscribed and helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.